I don't have a question. It just I've listened to a couple of your streams, and it seems like you really like to like go over the theory, read the books, and it's all good, research, knowledge. But the books don't cover like what this theory, when implemented, what it how it manifests in real life of ordinary people. Like it's all, this broad theory of society and how it's all gonna pan out and whatever. But in the end, like, so I was born in the early '80s. Of course, my parents lived through the whole USSR. My dad was born right after the World War II, as my mom was, and so like I got the end of it, but my brother, he's 10 years older than me, so he got like the 70s, and my sister too.
There's
So I
echo.
got a lot of, it's anecdotal evidence. I just want to share that, all this ideas of communism, Marxism, that everybody will be like, I don't know, uh, the society will function productively. It's not really happening
So Noah's
in
gonna have.
reality. And
We're not
what
gonna
it,
be able to
like
hear Noah right now.
when you go over, like, if you, it's hard to explain because you haven't lived through it. You don't know what it is. You haven't lived. Yeah, like you never had to go to a store. And like just a couple of stories. Like I'll try to be quick. Like when I was like a little kid, yeah, I was like 6 years old. I still remember myself. Like I remember what I was doing back then. One of the fun things to do for us was to go to a local toy store, and like we went there like every 2 days, and for years nothing changed. The same toys, same everything. Like right now, when I look at it, it's like, I mean, it's depressing, the life I was living. When the Iron Curtain fell, I saw like what my life could have been. Like my aunt was my dad's sister lived in Estonia, so what their life became after the curtain fell, when they got rid of communism and all this dogma and stuff. Like my parents, like they read my parents' generation. They grew up on all these books of Leninism, and they read all the books in schools. They got, they were the pioneers. They wore the red scarves and everything. They marched. They read all the literature. They had the courses in the university. But what's happened, like all these teachings, what they should have taught you is like I saw a couple of your, because I engaged with you on Twitter. I saw a couple of your posts, like you help in the community, and that's all great. And you think that this will be, you think that this will be, maybe you have an idea
Yeah.
yeah, I can
Okay.
get to
I
the
can.
point. The
So
point is, it's all good and cool on paper. In the reality, when everything belongs to everybody, everything belongs to nobody, and people stop giving shit about everything.
wait. Wait.
For a good example is that
Hold on.
people who live
Can
in
I
the same
stop you real
community,
quick,
they,
Philip? What makes you think that communism is everything belonging to everybody? Because I'm
well,
looking at
that's what,
communist China right now, who have a far better standard of living in their cities than we do in ours in capitalist America. I'm thinking of my childhood where I was lucky to get a toy from a toy store because we grew up poor. And I'm not seeing how it's that different from your childhood at the admittedly like very seriously problematic end of the Soviet Union, but I'm not seeing as how that is sort of the essential content of communism when I'm seeing communism thrive in China right now. And their kids, I have a 15-year-old whose future I'm very seriously worried about. And in China, they're very optimistic about the future. They have something to look forward to. Um, 25% of our entire country 2 years ago said they would have been in favor of a violent revolution. 95%
I,
of the
I'm not
Chinese
defending your
either
current
in favor of their
country.
government. So like what I mean to say is that like I'm not sure that we're blaming things on the correct things, if that makes sense.
Well, the whole so yeah, I'm giving you just an account of the person
Well,
whose family lived through the communism.
and
Well, Noah and Carlos's
They
family
never
did
got
as
to live.
well. Let's let
And-
Carlos go here.
and we've also lived through capitalism, and we're communists. So what does that tell you? I mean, in any population, there's always going to be people that think differently. That's why every revolution takes the form of a civil war. I can bring to you right now a Palestinian who's very pro-Israel, but the reality is that the vast majority of Palestinians are pro-Palestine. They're against the entity that's carrying forth the genocide. And what we can tell from what happened in the Soviet states is that the vast majority of people preferred overwhelmingly their life under the Soviet Union than their life in shock therapy Russia, or even post shock therapy Russia with Putin. I mean, the statistics are very clear. It's around 80% in most of those states. So it could very well be the fact that you're in that small 20%, and that's fine. Now, I think an important point is
Well,
contextual,
that's
one,
a wrong statistic.
which is
It's not correct.
the if I may, which
It
is the
is
fact
correct.
that you grew up in the 80s. What was happening to the Soviet Union in the 80s, and what was happening to the Soviet Union after the horrendous attempt at de-Stalinization, which was an utter failure, and it started, I think, a period of a very long period of degenerating the Soviet Union. You were at the culmination point of objectively anti-communist politics within the Communist Party. And what you experienced within the Soviet Union was not uh, necessarily what socialism was at its best in the Soviet Union. What you experienced was a leadership that was a culmination of a long generation of leaders that had betrayed the actual cause of the Soviet Union, that kept up only a formalistic shell of what socialism was. I mean, people just went into the party because it was the only place that you can climb a social ladder, not because they were actual communists. And what sort of society do you end up with? Socialist, capitalist, feudal, whatever it is, if the people that are in the leadership positions are merely there to have their position and not because they actually believe in the ideals that the society stands for. That's what ended up happening to the Soviet Union. Now China doesn't have a condition that's anywhere near like that. Now, if people want to get ahead in their lives, there's a million different avenues that they can go to do that through. And the people that are in the party are the people that actually believe in the party and that are actual public servants. The Soviet Union, unfortunately, because of the Khrushchevite administration, ended up degenerating into a very corrupt shell of what it was, and that was the Soviet Union that you experienced. So what you're longing for, quite honestly, is a more Stalinist Soviet Union, which is what I think we all accept should have taken root after the death of Stalin.
And there were still people in the party at that time too who had really good ideas for how to, combat corruption and fix a lot of the problems that were going on. And they ended up, yeah, right, and people like Andropov, and they ended up being pushed aside by these other forces who were, of course, being backed by the forces of imperialism in the United States, who absolutely plundered the post-Soviet economies afterwards, which is why unemployment increased, malnutrition increased, drugs and sex trafficking flowed back over the border. People lost the universal daycare and universal health care that was supplied by the governments. And that's the reason why about 80% of people want to return to a Soviet-style system. It isn't ideological so much as it has to do with the everyday comforts that were provided. Yes, the system was corrupt. Yes, the bureaucracy was bloated. Yes, there were flaws, but at least we had healthcare. At least we had daycare. At least our housing was about 2% of our income rather than 25% of our income paid to these parasitic landlords. I mean, it honestly gives us a good way to juxtapose socialism at its worst, or socialism not functioning well, versus capitalism at its best. Socialism at its worst is still better for regular people than capitalism at its best, because now in America, we're all drowning under medical debt. 60% of this country has medical debt, which is something that would have been completely foreign to a Soviet citizen or a Cuban citizen. Where things like these necessities like healthcare are just provided. So Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
as
you have
simple as
this.
just
You have
communism
this.
doesn't work on in practice, you know.
Let me
You,
just
you
say
have
one more
this. You know,
thing real quick for you, buddy.
utopian.
Even the Soviet Union at its most sort of decayed element in the late 80s is nowhere near as horrendous as Russia and the former Soviets got after the fall of the Soviet Union. Life got so bad. There were so many people fleeing and so many people committing suicide and being murdered by gangs so their apartments could be stolen and sold off to the highest bidder as part of their investment portfolio that the life expectancy went down by 10 years. New drugs were invented that put literal phosphorus into heroin to sort of elongate the escape that people had to get because life was that bad. And it's not even just them. Millions of people around the world suffered, starved, and died because the Soviet Union was no longer there to defend their country from my ruling class's economic blockades. The Cubans call this period the special period. Their only trading partner for energy and to get actual capital was gone. For food because their soil had been so corrupted by the plantation system. The Koreans call this the arduous march. You hear about people fleeing Korea and Cuba. It isn't communism they were fleeing. It is this 90s starvation enacted by these blockades that the Soviet Union and its strength was powerful enough to go against. And that means something for people all over the world.
And George Bush invaded Iraq shortly
That's
after
true.
the fall of the Soviet Union because they were no longer there to provide that umbrella of protection for the third world and essentially allowed the U.S. to rampage across the globe and do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, you're done. Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, so you have this very cool idealistic view of the healthcare system in the Soviet Union. I went to the hospital. It was shit. I mean, you would have died if you had something serious. Would have fucking died on a chair waiting for a line. So don't tell me about the good, cool, free healthcare.
Well, I have healthcare debt, and 45,000 people die in my country every year for the same thing. So you don't tell me
I'm
about
not
healthcare.
defending your country, man. Why you keeping bringing up US? I'm not telling you're the best country in the world.
Because
Soviet Union was shit.
Because there's no other alternative to capitalism than socialism. There's no alternative to our system besides the Soviet system, which did provide universal healthcare. And try going to the healthcare systems before 1917. Try going to the hospital under the Tsar. You think that was any fucking better?
Better than what?
Better than what the
Soviet
communists
system.
brought with the revolution.
They brought
the healthcare
hospitals
system
and
right now is better than the communist thing.
they no. They brought hospitals.
Even under the bombings of Russia, the healthcare system is better than under Soviets.
You're saying that the czarist like third world Russia was better than the Soviet healthcare system?
The current healthcare system is better than the Soviets.
Who built all those hospitals in Ukraine? Who was that? Who built all the healthcare facilities in Ukraine? Who built all the infrastructure in Ukraine? Who brought Ukraine out of poverty? It was the 1917 revolution. Well, not the 1917 revolution, but it was communism.
When Ukraine declared independence, the two Ukraine states that declared independence, the communists decided, fuck it, we're just going to kill them and take their land, which they did. We lost. Well, what you fucking do?
Not true.
All right. Well,
what?
You have been indoctrinated by the Banderite educational system, which was designed to lie to you in order to accept what is essentially an ideology that is indistinguishable
it was taught
from
to
Nazism.
me during the Soviet times.
You have been lied to. You said you were born in the 80s. That means you got what until you're 9 years old at the Soviet Union. So you have been lied to systematically through the funding of the West and specifically the US in order to accept an ideology that is fundamentally just Nazism with Ukrainian characteristics. Even the Nazis themselves often told the Banderite forces to calm down because they were taking it too far. So if you are working within the framework of a history that has been rewritten in order to support these forces, I'm sorry to tell you, my friend, but everything that you have been told about your
Wait a minute,
history
are you
is a lie.
telling me Soviet Russia did not invade newly formed Ukrainian states?
Nope.
Correct.
They did not invade. They did not take Kharkiv. They did not install their government. They did not install overtook the Ukrainian new like these states. What they lasted for a year and something because they decided not to, build
Do
an
you
army.
know what
So
happened
they
in
fucking
Ukraine?
lost.
You're talking about the struggle in Ukraine against the Banderites, right?
No, I think he's
No,
talking
Against the
about
right-wing
were in the
forces?
Second
The
World War.
origins.
What the hell, man?
Are you saying the Banderites still don't exist in Ukraine, or what? Or are you talking about pre World War II Ukraine?
Ukraine, first Ukrainian state, was created after the fall of Tsarist Russia. There were two states of Ukraine. And so Soviet Russia invaded them, took them over.
Soviet
force.
Russia kind of created the Ukrainian state, though, and there was a lot of what they
Ukrainian
called.
state was created
Can you not
almost at the
interrupt
same
me,
time
man?
as Soviet Russia.
Look. What happens is that the Soviet of Nations is formed, right? And this determines all of the national policies for the entire Soviet Union, which the people of Ukraine decided to enter. The Russians didn't come
By
and force
force.
them
They
to be
were
part of
forced
Russia.
to enter.
They were always Ukraine as a Soviet socialist republic, right? And yes, there were differences in lands from the Polish taking some, the I want to say Austrian and German forces took some in World War One, and then oh god, I'm forgetting exactly. I don't want to say anything incorrect, so that doesn't even matter. But what matters is from there, during the life of Ukraine within the Soviet Union, Ukraine gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You know what wasn't part of Ukraine at its formation as a nation state? Crimea, right? You know this.
Yes.
So how are you saying that the Russians are taking Ukrainian land when Ukraine kept getting bigger throughout the history of the Soviet Union? You're not going to like do a hello Domor thing at me next, are you? I mean, come on, we should stay realistic.
Can you do chronologically, right? So, a Ukrainian state, two states after the fall of Tsarist Russia, were created in 1918. At the same time, the Soviet Russia was created. Like the revolution was still, settling down.
Right. The Civil War was
and
going
then
on and
the
all that.
Soviets took over these two Ukrainian states.
That's not
If
true.
you
What
fucking
you're
Martian-
just because there was force involved doesn't mean it was either an invasion or what you're saying it is. There was genuine class struggles at play in all of these countries. There was violent conflicts in all of them. And just because your side was the one that was on the losing side doesn't mean that you lost because the Soviets intervened. No, it means that the people who were aligned with the Soviets in your country won. There's a difference between there being these struggles and one side winning.
The military then.
The way you're phrasing it is as if the Soviet Union just came in, squashed all of you, and that's it. No, there was genuine communists in Ukraine, specifically the eastern parts, a whole lot of them. And those people aligned with the Soviet Union, and they won the battle when the existing state structure collapsed. When that happens, it's force, buddy. It's force. Force wins out, and the communists won out.
Which is what strengthened the Ukrainian state and allowed it, as Noah said, to keep growing, which is something that you didn't respond to that argument because you have no response besides, oh, Russia came in and held them at the barrel of a gun and forced them to grow and become a strong independent state. How dare they? This is tyranny. No, they backed the popular forces in Ukraine who established Ukrainian independence in the first place. There would be no Ukraine if it wasn't for the 1917 revolution. I agree with you on that, but that's not fucking oppression.
It also
to your house, force you to do sports and live
economically significant.
Who in Ukraine was forced to do sports? Or did Stalin come in with a gun and say everybody's going to the basketball courts now? Everybody meet up at the park. We're gonna.
You want to know what it's more like? It's more like if you want to reduce it to the micro level. Okay, you have a house, and in that house There's different people that have different interests. There's a patriarch that's beating the mother, that's beating the kids, and then there's a rebellion from those kids and that mother. And the neighbor, the friendly Soviet Union, it comes in and it kicks the ass of the guy that's been domestically abusing the people. That's the situation that you're describing, and you're saying, "Oh my God, the neighbor came in and he beat me up. Oh my God, now the house belongs to the same sort of sphere as it." No, there was genuine grievances. Are you going to ignore the fact that Ukraine itself was not this homogenous entity, that it was fragmented by different forces? There was people that stood with the communists and people that didn't, and the ones that stood with the communists won, and of course they had the help of the Soviets, just like the people that didn't stand with the communists had the help of the West in fighting against the communists.
I mean, this is kind of like, it reminds me, and you know what? I feel bad. I feel like we're ganging up on you, and I don't want to do that. Usually this show is just me, but anyway, it seems to me kind of like King George complaining after the Americans boot him out off of the continent. Right? Like, oh, those evil revolutionaries wanted freedom. Yes, of course they wanted freedom. Right? That's what the revolution was all about. There was a period of chaos throughout the entire region, and the communists won, and they brought order, and they brought stability, and they brought technology and trade, and it took Ukraine as part of the Soviet Union from a third world country where most people couldn't even read to part of the second largest economic power in the entire world, inventing spaceflight in a handful of decades. That's not oppression, brother. It's just not. You don't just give a country the most important port in the entire region for no reason, by the way. No reason. Still mostly Russians living in Crimea, right? You don't just do that to a country that you hate and want to oppress because of the nature of that country. No, this is a lie the Banderists have been telling forever. And you know why I know that? Because the CIA, my country's government, has been funding them since the end of World War II. And I study what my ruling class does very in depth. I hate to cut you short, brother, but if you want to call back and discuss stuff in the future, by all means. We got one more call to get to, and I want to make sure I'm fair to their time. So if you got anything else to hit us with it.
Yeah, I don't know. You bring up, we're talking about one period. You for some reason you're focused on the Banderites, which I never even mentioned. But I mean, dude, if it's your boogeyman, go for it.
Well, you can't talk about anti-communism in Ukraine without talking about the Banderists.
Right, the Banderites were the only reason we bring them up is because they're the main reactionary force in Ukraine since the end of World War II up until today, and the reactionary forces in Ukraine prior to the 1917 revolution weren't Banderites. Stefan Bandera didn't exist at the time, but those reactionary forces were what evolved into the Banderites. And the people fighting against them have always been the communists, the left-wingers, the more left-wing type of nationalists, and the Soviet Union. And the main critique of the Soviet Ukrainian policy in Russia today is that they gave them too much independence. They gave them too much leeway and control, and that allowed Banderism and nationalism to fester and grow, with, of course, the CIA watering it and fertilizing it every step of the way.
The real critique is
how dare those people self-determine, right?
Oh, so you're okay with the CIA going in and helping out the Banderites, but not the Soviets going in and helping the communists. I get it. And now you don't get why we would bring up Banderism, because you have the same position as the Banderites.
I said peoples, like, Russians, Ukrainians, Kazakhstan, peoples, not just men, like people's self-determination.
People's, not men's self-determination, as in like women as well, non-binary.
I think he means as in
people's,
singular.
like,
they, them determination for Ukraine.
Ethnicities, people's ethnicities, self-determination.
What about them? The Soviets were the ones who established that principle and helped make it concrete around the world.
Independent. What's the problem? Self-determination. We don't want that.
Leave
us alone. Get the fuck out.
It seems that today in Ukraine, it is the western parts of Ukraine denying the self-determination of the people in Donbass, right? in the
Donbass are
republics of
Ukrainians.
Lugansk.
They're not separate people.
Wait,
They're
hold on.
Ukrainians.
You got to let me finish what I'm saying before, so you understand
Okay.
the whole thing, right? So to me, it seems as if the people in Western Ukraine, led by the Nazis, the Banderists, are the ones that are trying to deny the self-determination of the people in Lugansk and Donetsk. I have friends that have been there and seen it firsthand, right? So if we're going to talk about self-determination, this is precisely what all of the people of Ukraine did when they joined the Soviet Union. Nobody forced them to do that. That was the popular forces within Ukraine winning a violent struggle, right? There were the Makhnovites that were against them, and the ultra nationalists, all those people, but they lost.
And they
That's
lost.
what
Yeah.
happens during a revolutionary era. That's what happened here in the U.S. in 1776, right? The people interested in
Agreed.
self-determination won. And you're welcome, A-Name. I try to be honest, you know. But anyway, that's all the time we got for tonight. But I'm happy to talk about this more in the future if you want to call